Introduction. In 1519, a man named Hernán Cortés stood on a beach in Mexico and watched his life's work go up in flames. He wasn't some fearless hero from a movie. He was a man with a massive problem. He had landed in a new world with a small group of soldiers who were terrified. They were tired, they were outnumbered, and they were already talking about quitting. His men kept looking over their shoulders at the 11 ships bobbing in the water. Those ships represented safety. They represented the old way of doing things. As long as those boats existed, the men could never give their full effort to the mission in front of them. They had one foot in the future and one foot in the past. Cortés knew he couldn't talk them out of their fear. He didn't give a grand speech about bravery. Instead, he gave a very simple, very scary order: burn the ships. He didn't do this because he was a thrill seeker. He did it because he knew human nature. He knew that to win a new battle, you have to remove the option of going back to your old failures. Once the smoke cleared and the ships were at the bottom of the ocean, the men had no choice. They had to look forward. They were finally free to focus on what was right in front of them. The heavy backpack. Most of us are currently standing on that beach, but we are refusing to light the match. We carry our ships around with us like a heavy backpack full of stones. Every time someone was mean to us in high school, we added a stone. Every time we failed at a job or a relationship ended, we added another. By the time we reach adulthood, we are walking around with 100 pounds of what-ifs and if-onlys strapped to our spines. This weight does more than just make us tired. It changes how we think. It makes us move slowly. It makes us afraid to take risks because we are already carrying too much. Scientists at Harvard found something very interesting about this. They discovered that humans are actually terrible at guessing how long a bad feeling will last. We think a mistake will hurt forever. We think a breakup is a permanent stain on our lives. But the truth is, our brains are built to heal. The only reason the pain stays is that we keep reaching back into the past to pick it up again. This is called the Zeigarnik effect. It is a fancy way of saying that our brains hate unfinished business. If we don't close the loop on a past event, our mind will keep playing it on repeat like a broken record. This uses up all your mental energy. It leaves you with nothing left for your family, your work, or your happiness. Meet Leo. Leo Thorne knows exactly what this weight feels like. Leo is 38 years old and works in a beautiful glass office in Seattle. He manages big projects for the aerospace industry. To anyone looking in from the outside, Leo has it all figured out. But inside, Leo is still standing in the wreckage of a startup company he started 5 years ago. It failed and his investors lost their money. Leo blames himself for every penny. He also believes that his stress during that time is what caused his marriage to end. Right now it is 6 p.m. Leo is staring at a spreadsheet. The project he is working on is only 2% over budget, which is normal for big airplanes, but Leo's heart is racing. His chest feels tight. His brain is telling him, it's happening again. You're going to lose it all again. Leo is a mental hoarder. He hasn't let go of a single mistake he's made since he was 20. He thinks that if he thinks about his failures long enough, he can prevent them from happening again. He thinks letting go is the same thing as giving up. He doesn't realize that his ships are still sitting in the harbor, keeping him from ever truly reaching the shore. The 60-Minute Promise. This book is for the Leos of the world. It is for anyone who feels like their mind is a computer with 50 tabs open, and 40 of them are about things that happened years ago. Over the next hour, you are going to learn how to be a flow strategist. This isn't about forgetting what happened. It is about changing your relationship with it. You are going to learn how to identify which stones in your backpack are worth keeping and which ones you can drop on the side of the road right now. We are going to use the wisdom of Roman emperors, escape artists, and people who survived the hardest places on earth to show you a shortcut to peace. You don't need years of sitting on a couch talking about your childhood to feel better. You can start releasing the pressure in minutes. The clock is starting now. By the time you reach the end of this journey, you will know how to stop the looping thoughts that keep you awake at night. Separate what you can control from what you can't. Forgive yourself for not being perfect. Move into your future without dragging your past behind you. Leo is about to close his laptop and take his first real breath in years. It's time for you to do the same. The matches are in your hand. The ships are waiting. Let's burn them. Chapter 1: 3 Pillars of Emotional Release. 2 men sat in the mud on the edge of the Roman Empire. It was the year 170 AD, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and sickness. The first man was a career soldier. He spent his nights staring into the campfire, cursing the rain, the cold, and the barbarians across the river. He replayed every insult his commander had ever shouted at him. He carried his anger like a heavy rucksack that he never took off. By the time morning came, he was exhausted before the battle even began. A few tents away sat the second man, Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor of Rome, the most powerful person on the planet. He had more reasons to be stressed than anyone. His children were dying of a plague, his generals were plotting against him, and the empire was crumbling. Yet Marcus did not spend his nights pacing or shouting. He sat with a small book and wrote notes to himself. He wasn't writing about how to defeat his enemies. He was writing about how to defeat his own heavy thoughts. He knew that if he carried the weight of yesterday into today, he would eventually break. Most people believe that being strong means pushing your feelings down into a dark basement and locking the door. We think that if we just stop looking at a bad memory, it will disappear. This is the great myth of strength. We treat our minds like a storage unit, where we can just keep piling up old boxes of regret. We assume that letting go is something that happens naturally over time, like a wound healing. The truth is the exact opposite. In 1996, a scientist named Daniel Wegner conducted a famous experiment. He asked a group of people not to think about a white bear. He told them to ring a bell every time the image of a white bear popped into their heads. The room sounded like a Christmas parade. The harder they tried to ignore the bear, the more the bear took over their minds. This is why just don't think about it never works. Pushing a thought away is like trying to hold a beach ball under the water. Your arms get tired, your heart rate goes up, and eventually the ball pops up and hits you in the face. Marcus Aurelius understood this nearly 2,000 years ago. He realized that the mind is the only thing we truly own. He once wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you spend all day thinking about how someone wronged you, your soul turns a dark, muddy gray. To stay clear, Marcus developed what we now call the 3 pillars of release: awareness, acceptance, and action. Leo Thorne sat on his sparsely decorated sofa in Seattle, trying to put these pillars to work. He had a yellow legal pad on his lap. At the top of the page he wrote, "The Backpack of Stones." For years, Leo felt a literal tightness in his chest, as if he were wearing a lead vest. He started to list the stones he was carrying. He wrote down the startup failure and the divorce. As he looked at the words, he realized he had been treating these 2 events as one giant, immovable mountain. By writing them down, he was using the first pillar, awareness. He was naming the stones. The startup was a 50-pound rock of guilt. The divorce was a 60-pound rock of shame. For the first time in 5 years, Leo didn't try to look away. He stared at the list until his eyes burned. He felt the weight, but he also felt something else, a tiny spark of control. He wasn't the failure, he was the man carrying the failure. There was a difference. This leads to the second pillar, acceptance. This doesn't mean you like what happened. It just means you stop arguing with the past. You stop saying, "It shouldn't have been this way." Marcus Aurelius used to tell himself that the fire makes use of everything that is thrown into it. A small candle might go out if you drop a heavy log on it, but a great fire turns that log into heat and light. Acceptance is the act of turning your logs of regret into fuel. The final pillar is action. This isn't a big, life-changing move. It is the simple, physical act of deciding what to do with your hands right now. Researchers at UCLA found that when people put their feelings into simple words, like "I feel sad" or "I feel anxious," the alarm center in their brain actually calms down. It's like the brain says, "Oh, you noticed the alarm? Good. I can stop ringing it now." Think of your mind like a kitchen pantry. If you have a jar with no label, you might accidentally put salt in your coffee instead of sugar. You'll keep making the same mistake over and over until you finally put a sticker on the jar that says, "Salt." Labeling your past mistakes doesn't make them go away, but it stops them from ruining your next cup of coffee. Now that Leo has identified the stones and labeled the jars, he has to face a harder question. If these stones are so heavy, and he knows they are there, why hasn't he just dropped the backpack? The answer lies in a strange glitch in the human brain that makes us fall in love with our own losses. Chapter 2: Why do we cling to what hurts us? On October 24, 2003, a sleek white plane with a nose like a needle touched down at London's Heathrow Airport. This was the Concorde, the fastest passenger jet ever built. As it rolled to a stop, fans cheered and pilots waved flags. It looked like a grand finale for a champion. In reality, it was the end of a 40-year disaster. The plane was a mathematical failure that should have been stopped decades earlier. The reason it kept flying is the same reason you are still holding onto a mistake you made 5 years ago. In the 1960s, the governments of Britain and France decided to build a plane that could fly faster than the speed of sound. They poured millions of pounds and francs into the project. Very quickly, the engineers realized there were massive problems. The engines drank too much fuel. The plane was so loud it wasn't allowed to land in many cities. It could only carry a small number of people, making tickets way too expensive for most travelers. By the mid-1970s, the experts knew the Concorde would never make a profit. It was a money pit. A smart person would have walked away. But the leaders couldn't do it. They felt that because they had already spent so much money and time, they had to keep going. They didn't want to admit they were wrong. This became known as the Concorde fallacy. It is the trap of sunk costs. We stay in bad jobs, bad relationships, and bad moods because we feel like we've already paid too much to leave. The glue in our hands. Our brains are wired to be mental hoarders. Thousands of years ago, if a human found a piece of fruit or a sharp stone, they held onto it for dear life because resources were scarce. Today, we do the same thing with our pain. Scientists call this the endowment effect. We value things more just because they belong to us, even if those things are bad memories. We also deal with something called negativity bias. Your ancestors survived because they remembered exactly where the lion lived. They didn't need to remember where the pretty flowers were, they needed to remember the danger. This is why a single insult from a stranger sticks in your mind longer than 100 compliments from your friends. Your brain thinks it is protecting you by keeping the fire of your past failures burning. It thinks that if you stop feeling the pain, you'll forget the lesson and get eaten again. Leo Thorne sat in a crowded Seattle coffee shop, his palms sweating. He was waiting for Sarah, a woman who had invested $50,000 into his failed startup years ago. Leo had rehearsed his apology 1,000 times. In his mind, Sarah was a ghost that followed him everywhere, a symbol of his greatest shame. He felt he owed her a lifetime of guilt. When Sarah finally sat down, she looked happy. She talked about her kids and her new hobby of mountain biking. Leo waited for a gap in the conversation. "Sarah," he started, his voice shaking, "I am so sorry about the money. I think about it every day. I feel terrible that I let you down." Sarah looked at him with genuine confusion. "Leo," she said, "I stopped thinking about that investment 4 years ago. My accountant wrote it off, and I moved on. I'm doing great. Are you telling me you've been carrying this around all this time?" Leo felt a strange mix of relief and deep embarrassment. The startup stone in his backpack wasn't being held there by Sarah. He was the one holding the glue. The grip analysis. When we refuse to let go, it is usually because of one of three grips. These are the psychological reasons we keep the Concorde flying long after it has run out of fuel. The guilt grip. You believe that suffering is a way to pay for your mistakes. You think that if you stop feeling bad, it means you aren't a good person. The fear grip. You are afraid of the empty space. If you stop thinking about your ex-partner or your old career, who are you? The pain has become your identity. The ego grip. You don't want to be wrong. Admitting that a situation is over feels like admitting you failed. You keep trying to fix the past so you can win. Leo realized his grip was a mix of all three. He was using his guilt as a shield, thinking it made him look responsible. In reality, it just made him tired. He was so busy apologizing for a dead business that he didn't have the energy to start a new one. Letting go is not about losing what you put into a project or a relationship. That time and money are already gone. You cannot get them back by suffering more. Imagine you are at a movie theater and the movie is terrible. You have two choices. You can sit there for 2 more hours because you already paid $20 for the ticket, or you can walk out and enjoy the sunshine. Either way, the $20 is gone. The only thing you can save is your time. Reframing your past isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It is about realizing that your ships have already sunk. You can stand on the shore and cry about the wood and the sails, or you can start building a house on the new land you found. The weight you are carrying isn't a requirement. It's a choice you are making every 60 seconds. Chapter 3: Mastering the Art of Selective Indifference. In 1999, researchers at Cornell University asked a group of students to wear a t-shirt with a big embarrassing picture on the front. The students were told to walk into a room full of people. They were sure that at least half of the people in the room would notice their cringe shirt and judge them for it. When the researchers actually talked to the people in the room, only 23% had even noticed the shirt. This is called the spotlight effect. We walk through life thinking there is a giant spotlight on our mistakes and our flaws. In reality, most people are too busy worrying about their own spotlights to even glance at yours. The truth is, we spend a massive amount of our mental energy on things that simply do not matter. We care about what the neighbor thinks of our lawn. We care about a rude comment from a stranger on the internet. We care about the look a coworker gave us in the break room. This habit of caring about everything is like trying to carry a bucket of water with 100 holes in it. By the time you get to where you are going, you are empty. The man in the jar. Long before scientists studied the spotlight effect, there was a man named Diogenes. He lived in Athens, Greece, around 2,300 years ago. Diogenes didn't have a house or a job. He lived in a large clay jar in the middle of the city. He owned nothing but a cloak and a wooden bowl. He was the ultimate master of selective indifference. He decided that the opinions of important people were worthless if they didn't lead to a better life. One afternoon, the most powerful man in the known world, Alexander the Great, came to Athens. He had heard stories about the wise man who lived in a jar and wanted to meet him. Alexander found Diogenes lying in the dirt, enjoying the afternoon sun. Alexander stood over him, surrounded by soldiers and expensive armor. He looked down at Diogenes and said, "Ask me for any favor you want, and I will give it to you." Most people would have asked for gold, a palace, or power. Diogenes didn't even sit up. He looked at the most powerful man on earth and said, "Move a little to the side. You are blocking my sun." Diogenes wasn't being mean. He was simply indifferent. He knew that Alexander's power couldn't give him anything more valuable than the warmth of the sun on his skin. He had filtered out the noise of social status and fame. To Diogenes, Alexander was just a man standing in the way of his light. Leo's filter. Back in Seattle, Leo Thorne was struggling with a different kind of noise. He was sitting in his glass-walled office, looking at a project report. A younger manager, someone Leo had always felt was a bit arrogant, walked by and tapped on the glass. "Still working on that budget, Leo?" the man asked with a smirk. "You know, we usually automate those reports now. It saves a lot of time. But I guess some people like doing things the hard way." 5 years ago, Leo would have spent the rest of the night replaying that comment in his head. He would have felt his face get hot. He would have planned a stinging comeback to use at the next meeting. He would have added a new stone to his backpack, the stone of wounded ego. But today, Leo stopped. He pictured Diogenes in his jar. He looked at the manager, and then looked at his phone. On his phone was a picture of his daughter. He asked himself a simple question: does this man's opinion help me be a better father or finish this work faster? The answer was no. Leo felt the anger rise, but he didn't let it take root. He used the indifference filter. "Thanks for the tip," Leo said. He didn't even look up from his screen. He went back to work, and 30 seconds later, he had forgotten the man was even there. He didn't add a stone to his pack. He kept his energy for the things that actually moved his life forward. The 24-hour rule. When you try to practice indifference, you will run into a common problem. Your brain is wired to care. For thousands of years, if the tribe didn't like you, you were kicked out into the wild to starve. Caring was a survival skill. Today, that same survival skill makes you feel like a bad email is a life-threatening emergency. When something happens that makes you want to cling to anger or worry, use the 24-hour rule. High-performance athletes use this to stay focused. If they lose a big game, they allow themselves to feel the pain, the anger, and the frustration for exactly 24 hours. They can talk about it, cry about it, or be mad about it. But once the clock hits the 24-hour mark, they let go of the result. They don't carry the loss into the next game. You can apply this to the low-priority things in your life. Identify the trigger. Is this a stone, something that matters, or just noise, someone else's opinion? Set the timer. If it's just noise, give yourself 60 seconds to be annoyed. The indifference filter. Ask, will this matter in 5 years? If not, it doesn't deserve a place in your mind today. Selective indifference isn't about being cold or heartless. It is about being protective of your peace. You only have a certain amount of care to give each day. If you spend it all on the person who cut you off in traffic, you won't have any left for the people you love. The sun is shining. Don't let the world's noise block your light. Chapter 4: The Night the Library Burned. The Great Library of Alexandria was more than a building. It was the brain of the ancient world. Inside its stone walls, over 700,000 papyrus scrolls sat on cedar shelves. The air smelled like old paper, dried ink, and the salt from the nearby Mediterranean Sea. For hundreds of years, if a human discovered a secret about the stars or the human body, it ended up here. It was the only place on Earth where you could find the entire memory of the human race. Then it burned. Historians still argue about who started the fire. Some blame Julius Caesar. Others blame angry mobs. But the result was the same. In a few nights of smoke and heat, centuries of wisdom turned into gray ash. To the people of that time, it felt like the end of the world. They didn't just lose books, they lost their map of the past. They felt a void, a giant empty hole where their history used to be. We all have a library of Alexandria in our own lives. It might be a business you spent 10 years building that went bankrupt. It might be a marriage that ended after a decade of shared holidays and inside jokes. When these things burn down, we tend to stand in the ashes for years. We stare at the empty space and try to remember what the shelves looked like. We treat the loss like a permanent scar on our soul. But there is another way to look at a fire. In December 1914, a massive explosion rocked West Orange, New Jersey. Thomas Edison's legendary laboratory was on fire. Because of the chemicals inside, the flames were strange, bright colors, green and yellow, shooting 100 feet into the air. Most of Edison's life's work was in those buildings. He was 67 years old, too old to start over, most people thought. Edison didn't cry. He didn't scream at the sky. He found his son, Charles, and told him to go get his mother and all her friends. He said they would never see a fire like this again. The next morning, walking through the ruins of his empire, Edison looked at the blackened remains and said, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." Reframing the void. Edison understood a secret that the ancient world didn't. He didn't see an empty hole. He saw cleared land. When something big leaves your life, it creates a vacuum. It feels heavy, like a massive stone in your backpack. You carry the divorce stone or the failure stone because you think you owe it to the past to keep mourning. You think that if you stop feeling the pain, you are forgetting the person or the effort. But letting go isn't about forgetting. It is about realizing that the fire has already happened. You cannot unburn the scrolls. You have two choices. Stay in the ruins and try to glue the ashes back together. Use the cleared land to build something that fits who you are today. This is called reframing the void. Most people see an ending as a loss of what was. A flow strategist sees an ending as the birth of what could be. If your library never burned, you would never have room to write a new book. You would be stuck reading the same chapters forever. The divorce stone. Leo Thorne sat on the edge of his daughter's bed in his small, quiet apartment. He was supposed to be tucking her in, but he had found an old wedding photo tucked inside a copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. In the picture, he was 10 years younger, grinning next to a woman who now only spoke to him in short, cold text messages. The divorce stone in his backpack felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He looked around the room. He saw the divorced dad furniture and the bare walls. For 3 years, he had been living in the ruins of the fire. He was so busy mourning the library of his marriage that he treated his new life like a waiting room. His daughter Maya tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, you're sad again," she whispered. Leo looked at her. He realized he was so focused on the empty shelves of his past that he was ignoring the person sitting right in front of him. He was making Maya live in the ashes with him. He realized that the marriage was the cleared land. It was a tragedy, yes, but it was over. The fire was out. He took a deep breath and tucked the photo into a drawer out of sight. He didn't throw it away, but he stopped staring at it. He looked at Maya and smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. He wasn't ready to build a whole new library yet, but he was finally ready to stop standing in the smoke. Leo's journey wasn't over. The stone was still in his pack, but for the first time, he felt the buckle loosen. He began to wonder what he might build on the land he had been so afraid to use. Chapter 5: Detachment, the Secret to True Influence. Imagine a woman named Sarah, who has spent 3 weeks preparing a dinner for her new in-laws. She wants everything to be perfect. She buys the most expensive meat, polishes the silver until her arms ache, and spends hours worrying if the house smells like the neighbor's dog. When the guests finally arrive, Sarah is a nervous wreck. Her hands shake as she pours the wine. She is so focused on making them like her that she forgets to enjoy the meal. She burns the bread because she was too busy checking her hair in the mirror. By trying so hard to control how they feel about her, she actually makes the night awkward and tense. This is the trap of outcome attachment. When we tie our happiness to a specific result, we lose our power. We become like an actor who is so worried about the review in the tomorrow's newspaper that they forget their lines on stage today. We think that by gripping the steering wheel harder, we will get to where we want to go faster. In reality, we just get tired hands and a stiff neck. The freedom in the space. In 1942, a doctor named Viktor Frankl was taken to a Nazi concentration camp. He lost his home, his job, and his family. The guards took his clothes and gave him a number. He had nothing left that the world considers valuable. Most people would say he had no freedom at all. But Frankl noticed something that changed the way he saw the world. He realized that even when someone controls your body, they cannot control your mind unless you let them. He discovered that there is a tiny space between what happens to you and